Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Vice President Sefcovic. I'll start by thanking you. We haven't met since the crisis for the method. I would like to say that I'd like to thank you for the determination that you showed in defending the method, which was a defense based on principles, and I would say politically courageous. And I know that it's not something that the member states saw in a very good light. So I've started by some positive things, but let me also say that in this process now, we feel a bit like you're treating us like Pavlov's dog, that it's not worth explaining things to us, because by definition we'll be against it. That's sometimes the feeling that we've had in the procedure which led to the adoption of this position. It was as if you'd already decided that we would be against anything, whatever you proposed, that we were totally disconnected from reality, that we don't read the newspapers, that we're not showing solidarity with the people of Europe. That's the feeling that we sometimes have got in this process, which involves some sometimes rather difficult meetings where we got the impression there was a sort of conceptual embargo on what was being discussed. It's essential that the Commission have confidence in the responsibility of its staff. You would never get the results that you want to achieve with this college if your staff were not able to understand and to follow and to grasp the details. But the decision process that we've been through, as far as I'm concerned, has been very difficult. Receiving yesterday not a basic position, but actually a draft regulation already, I don't think that can be reconciled with the undertakings that you've just taken and the things that you've just said, and that we heard with a measure of relief. But the important thing is that you don't fall in love, so to speak, with your own draft there, the draft regulation, because I think we'll be able to seduce you with many other proposals and many other ideas. We don't want to get into a process which is not negotiations, but an exercise in convincing us. You see, we have ideas, we have things that we can put forward in this context, and I think you'll understand that we won't accept that we're put in as a negotiating straitjacket based only on the things in your own proposal. We will discuss the detail at a later stage, but one thing is fundamental for us. Not everything can have a figure put on it. It's not all numbers. There's a deep qualitative difference between reducing the amount of travel time to go back to the place you came from and replacing a whole category of staff by contract agents. That's not a question of money. That's a question of principles and values which underpins the European civil service. This choice you've made of replacing the secretaries by contract staff is a different political decision. It's a clear risk of nationalization of these functions, because the salary that you're proposing will not guarantee that public service remains attractive. So politically, it means reducing the scope of the parameters which your proposal is based on to just one part of the staff and not others. Another thing which we think is fundamental is the link, the automatic link which is being made between the expiry of the method and a reform which is not about the method, but which is on completely different chapters of our staff regulations. We want to avoid that you're programming the next reform because the method will expire. We understand that staff regulations have to be modified, but it must be based on a real analysis of the need to change it, and not the Damocles sword hanging over our heads because the method expires. I think we all have to understand that if we're going to work in a constructive way. One final element which is important. You mentioned solidarity. Yes, solidarity is at the heart of our action and our vision of the European civil service. Solidarity to the people outside, to colleagues and citizens who have problems and are in difficulty, but also solidarity within the services. You can't go on thinking that the European civil service, your employees, are all privileged, all treated in the same way, all benefit from the privileges that, fingers are often pointed at us. There are difficulties within the services. Recruitment conditions for certain categories are not worthy of a civil service, and we have to understand that dimension too. It's not a Robin Hood operation, taking from some to give to others. It's a question, the question is guaranteeing that the staff are seen as one, a unitary staff. Another thing that's fundamental is the unicity of the staff regulations. We quite understand the risks of this operation for our secretary colleagues. We know what we're moving towards on this basis. That is, that option is adopted by the Commission and excluded by the Council and the Parliament that don't want it. That would be the worst thing we could do for the unicity of the staff regulations. Replacing official secretaries by people on limited-term contracts. If it's in the final version, it should only be an option, which may well not be accepted by the Parliament and the Council, who've said that undeterminate contracts are not part of their view of the staff regulations. You only have to look at the number of people on that kind of contract in those institutions, which is not comparable with what we have. You cannot have variable geometry solutions. The staff regulations have to remain single staff regulations. I just want to return to the determination that we have. You've seen that we haven't been afraid to take clear, decisive positions and actions without fearing moving to mobilization. Because at this stage of the decisional process that's been adopted, we think it's lacked some of the basic principles that we have to have, one of which is trust. I repeat that very clearly. You've explained some of the things so far, but nothing's been explained with us because you wanted to preserve the collegial nature of your institution. That's been your approach, that's what you've said to us. Nonetheless, we've felt that there's been a lack of trust, a lack of confidence, which is based on your idea, apparently, that whatever you propose, we'll be against it because we're unable to understand, we live in a different world. That is not true. We will show that that is not true, and it's important that on your side there is a clear undertaking that negotiations which we carry out will not simply be you convincing us that you're right, it will be a genuine negotiation based on your proposals, but also our proposals. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.